Military in Washington brought him around the country, forming relationships along the way. Now, here in North Carolina, Powell became friends with High Point University president Dr. Nido Qubein, and even gave the university's commencement speech back in 2014. Dr. Qubein joins us now with more on this tonight. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. It's really good to see you, sir.
Yes, sir, always.
Well, tell me, just before we get into how you know him and whatnot, tell me about the first time that you met him and what that was like getting to know him.
Well, the first time I met General Powell was in the State Department. He and I have both been inducted in the Horatio Alger Association for Distinguished Americans, and we have our luncheon every year in the State Department, and we have the induction actually in the Supreme Court. So I've got to know him through that organization many years ago, and our friendship grew over the years.
And so, obviously, I'm assuming you leveraged that to bring him to High Point. What was that like to bring him to High Point? And then he kind of became part of the university family too, right?
Yes, his relationship to our university has been quite close. He's been a great advocate of this institution. He's served on our Board of Advisors, National Board of Advisors. He's brought all kinds of people here to help us with many, many dimensions through media and other places. And of course, he spoke here, spoke to our students, spoke at graduation. And always, as you know, he was a man of faithful courage. He was a man of great intellect. He was a man who understood leadership at its very, very best. In fact, I interviewed him 1 hour for television, and in that interview, he showed and taught and proclaimed so many virtues and values and principles that are dear to us at High Point University and that bespeak of America as a land of the free and home of the brave.
It's one thing to see these people on TV and see what they've done. It's another thing to be behind closed doors with them and get to know them. What can you tell us about that, about who he was, you know, out of the public eye when you got to know him?
Yeah, he was a man who was very humble on the one hand and very confident on the other hand. He was a guy who cared about the smallest among us, and yet he could relate and communicate with the biggest among us. He knew how to be in the hallways of fame and fortune, and yet he also understood how to be in the places where people were struggling with the dailiness of life. And you know, my conversations with him have taught me a lot about him growing up in a segregated South. He told me the story one time, for example, how he was coming down from Washington to Fayetteville and needed to use the bathroom and had to find a specific place to use the bathroom, something as simple as that. And, you know, some of us sometimes don't relate to all of that until we hear it from somebody who has overcome such adversity and found abundance. And so his life is filled with many stories. I should also tell you that Colin Powell became a very, very well-known speaker, professional speaker, in the sense that many, many organizations asked him to speak. And he and I, of course, have crossed that pathway many times, speaking on the same platform, knowing the same audiences. He related to an audience in a magical way. He was funny, and yet he was very thoughtful and very introspective. He spoke with confidence, and yet he connected with every person in the audience. We've lost a grand gentleman. We've lost a person of a great stature, and I hope that his impact and influence will live on for generations to come.
Yeah, and I want to ask about that in a minute, but do you remember the last time that you had a chance to talk with him?
Yes, I saw him just about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, both at Horatio Alger, and then he came to High Point, North Carolina, to be the featured speaker at the Furniture Hall of Fame. I sat with him, had dinner with him. He kissed me on both cheeks, as it was traditional for him to do when he saw me, and we chatted about life and living. And he stood up on that platform in front of all these furniture leaders and just blew them away. I mean, he could do a 45-minute, an hour speech that is just pregnant with substance and substantial with its value. How do you think we should keep his legacy alive? Not just for what he's done, broad scale, but also for you, for what he's done at High Point. Well, I think his legacy is going to live for a long time because he was a leader among leaders. He's written books about principles he believed in. His appearances, of course, have been chronicled in the media and television and beyond. He has a relationship with so many people across this country who believe in what he taught, what he believed, and therefore will communicate that to other people in their pathways. I don't think we should be concerned about his legacy staying alive, because he's reaching to the schools. I think you may be aware of the fact that he's taken leadership principles and values to high schools and even elementary schools. He's endorsed programs that brought learning to students of all walks of life, talking about America and talking about freedom and talking about leadership. So I believe there's enough documentation of who he was and what he believed and what he taught and what he spoke about that we will continue to find both relevant and meaningful.
I think what's fascinating about him too is he was a Republican. He worked for all these Republicans. But, he called out things when he thought they were wrong. Obviously, he endorsed Joe Biden for president in 2020. What do you think that says about who he was as an individual and about right versus wrong, at least in his eyes?
He was an American first and foremost, and he will be the first to tell you that when you're a leader, you're not going to call it every time. You're not going to bat 1,000. You're not going to be a perfect individual. In fact, I asked him in my interview about a couple of times when he went sort of off track, and he said to me, you make decisions based on the information you have at the time. And occasionally you go back in time and find that perhaps your thoughts were not right, or perhaps your direction was not right, but that's what you had at the time. And he explained how an Army general has to make immediate decisions under pressure. And then you can always go back and try to evaluate and correct in future situations. But he was a man who owned his ideas, and he owned his achievements, and he owned his mistakes. And I think in that there's strength. I believe that his number one contribution was to create capacity in others. And he spoke a lot about that. How does one create capacity in others? How do we teach others, lead others, plant seeds of greatness in others? But he was undoubtedly of Jamaican parents, but an American through and through. He believed in this country. Politics may have played a small part here or there in what he did, but he believed in this nation, its future, and he loved its people.
Obviously, you were saddened, but what kind of first thoughts went through your mind when you heard away yesterday?
Yes, I was in Chicago yesterday when I heard the news. It was very, very sad. I was surprised because, he's a man of great physical strength too. When he walks in a room, you noticed him and you saw this man of courage, but he had some other complications that then when COVID came, it made it impossible for him. And we lost him at a young age. He was only 84 years young. He had many years ahead of him. He was still speaking across the country, and he was still serving on boards like our board here at HPU University. We will miss him sorely on this campus, yet his impact and influence will live on forever.
Well, I know you are a very busy man yourself. We appreciate some time tonight sharing the stories of his impact here in North Carolina. It's good to see you, sir. I hope we can see each other soon.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Hope you come see us on our campus.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to that. Thank you, sir. We have